And joining me now live over Zoom to break down what happens next is criminal defense attorney Robert Del Greco. Bob, thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Good evening. Thank you for having me.
In your opinion, what are the issues that the jury has to decide right now?
Well, of course, in a criminal case, it's the highest burden in the law, so the jury will have to determine guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, Derek Chauvin is charged with third-degree murder, second-degree murder, and manslaughter, which are various degrees of culpability relative to an episode where death results. Of course, second-degree murder, the most severe, third-degree murder next, and second-degree manslaughter, not as severe of the murder charge. But what they'll have to do is they will have to determine, in order to convict them of each and every element of those offenses. If you have a second, I wouldn't mind going through them with your viewers.
Of course, yeah, please do.
Before we do that, though, I want to hasten to say that Derek Chauvin is not charged with first-degree murder. And so there's not a death penalty, there's not a life imprisonment. No one has deemed it appropriate to indicate that he willfully, intentionally, premeditatedly, deliberately, or calculatedly committed a homicide. No one's saying that he was lying in wait, he poisoned everyone, or he had thought about this. And so for the third-degree murder case, essentially what they have to prove is that he was acting dangerously with what's called a depraved mind. I'd also like the viewers to know that Minnesota's third-degree, second-degree murder charges, as well as the manslaughter charges, essentially mirror Pennsylvania's in many ways. But what it requires is that he had a hardened heart. He had a depraved mind. He had a conscious disregard for the value of human life. He just really didn't care. For the second-degree murder, interestingly, he's the same kind of a deal, except a little less intent. Not quite as much hardness of heart or disregard, hate, depravity, disregard for human life, those kind of matters. And then, of course, with regard to the manslaughter charge, essentially they're saying he unintentionally caused the death of another under circumstances where he had a conscious disregard for the human life. He just didn't care. And so each of those elements will have to be proved to the satisfaction of the jury beyond a reasonable doubt. And this jury can convict them of all three, one or the other, or any permutation of those three.
Chauvin decided to not testify. What do you make of that?
It doesn't surprise seasoned defense lawyers and probably prosecutors too. I doubt that anyone expected him to testify. When you testify, you're subject to cross-examination, and a seasoned, experienced prosecutor or attorney would ask him some very, very difficult questions. The other thing that he's relying on, to the extent that the jury follows the judge's instruction, is that he has a right not to testify, and no adverse inference can be drawn from his failure to testify. So that is a neutral fact. I must tell you that in my experience, I don't have a high confidence for jurors following that component of the law that he doesn't have to testify. Generally, what jurors will say after a trial is, why didn't he testify? What was he hiding? In this instance, and I haven't followed the absolute details of this case, but in this instance, I think it was probably well advised that he not testify, because I think he'd have been subject to some grueling cross-examination and be put in a position where some of the explanations probably would not have been satisfying or appealing to a finder of fact.
Bob, thank you so much for your legal opinion and for taking the time to join us tonight.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.